Mr Temporary Speaker.
The question is the bill be read a second time. I call the member for Balmain.
Thank you very much, Mr Temporary Speaker. I rise this evening to speak on the Workers' Compensation Legislation Amendment Bill and the Safety Return to Work and Support Board Bill 2012. Mr Temporary Speaker, can I start by expressing my disappointment in the process? You've heard from several speakers this evening that the process has been very, very poor. The bills were presented in the House a matter of hours ago, and as members we should be vigorously viewing all of these bills, addressing the matters in the legislation and having the opportunity to review it in detail. As members for Lake Macquarie and the Northern Tablelands mentioned, that we as members and the community as a whole has a right to sufficient time to review the legislation. I take my role here very, very seriously, and I believe that my community and the people, not just in my electorate but around New South Wales, expect their members to review legislation in detail, and we have not had that opportunity. Nor have we had an opportunity for a briefing. Many of the issues that I raised tonight may well have been satisfied by a briefing. I attend, or my staff on occasion attend, the crossbench briefings, which does allow for a very significant amount of discussion and inquiry and an opportunity to address some of these matters. And I, in particular, look at those in a serious manner because there are consequences that need to be examined, and I'm particularly interested in the numbers and looking at the financial implications. And this bill, if nothing else, has a lot to do with how the financial management of the systems work. So I wanted to first of all start by putting on the record my disappointment. But when it comes to the specific elements of this bill, the impact on workers is indeed alarming. Previously, whilst ever an injured worker had incapacity for work because of their injury and it caused them a loss of income, they were entitled to make-up pay at their full weekly rate for 12 months and then at a reduced statutory rate. The statutory maximum after the first 12 months is approximately $400 a week for a single worker and up to $950 for a worker with a dependent spouse and 4 children dependents. Now, they only have to pay full make-up pay for the definition of full make-up pay for 13 weeks and a reduced rate thereafter. And we know that there'll be cut-offs in weekly payments. We know, as we've heard tonight, which I won't go through in detail, journey claims, with the exception of coal miners and police, will no longer be covered by workers' compensation. And I think in particular of my family members. My father, who for 30 years worked as a shift worker, left home at 3 o'clock in the morning to drive to work. And what risk one takes when you're driving at that kind of time in the morning, a lot of fatigued drivers around, is increased risk. And his work, and my brother, who also works shift work, 12-hour shifts, gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to work, will not be covered under this scheme. And in my view, that is an incredible reduction in the rights which working people currently enjoy, which should not be tolerated. Medical expenses as well slashed, lump sum payments reduced, and so on. So in order to review this bill in the small amount of time that we've had, I wanted to address some facts which come from the workers' compensation, which come from WorkCover's annual reports. Some facts: from 1997 to 2010, major workplace injuries fell by 53%, a positive thing. From 1997 to 2010, inflation increased by 44%. From 1997 to 2010, management fees increased by 236%.
Sorry, member for Balmain. Those with holding conversation, can you take it outside, please? The Hansard's having trouble listening to member for Balmain. Sorry.
So from 1997 to 2010, management fees increased by 236%. That's 5 times inflation. From 1997 to 2010, benefits paid increased by 43%, less than the rate of inflation. From 1997 to 2010, management fees per major injury increased by 620%, 14 times inflation. If private insurer management fees had, like benefits, grown only by inflation, then $1.6 billion would have been saved. In financial year 2010, management fees paid to private insurers accounted for 24% of the value of benefits paid to injured workers, compared to 10% in the financial year 1997. Now, what does that tell you, Mr Temporary Speaker? What it tells you is there is something systemically wrong with the way the system is being worked, not because of shonky claims by people that are looking at workers' compensation, but in terms of the fees, the costs and charges associated with the process. Now, if you look at these WorkCover annual reports, it shows that since 1996, private insurers have been paid more than $3.9 billion. And what is that $3.9 billion being paid for? To manage workers' compensation claims, to manage the claims. These fees have grown faster than both inflation and actual benefits paid to the injured. Now, if you have a look at these management fees for major injuries, there's some very important facts that are revealed, because the performance of the bureaucrats and the private insurers is more troubling when the reduction in injuries is factored in. Since 1997, serious workplace injuries have fallen by 53%. That is an amazing success story. From 60,109 to 28,056 in financial year 2010, 97 to 2010. On these figures, management fees per serious injury has grown 16 times faster than inflation, from 2,358 in financial year 97 to $17,000 in 2010. And you can look very simply at those numbers from the report. 96-97 financial year, management fee per major injury, $2,000. In 97-98, $2,300. Reasonable figures, one would imagine, to manage this process. And then we have in 1999, $2,000, $2,500. In 2000, 2001, $3,306. 2001, 2002, it goes on. In 2009, 2010, the last year we have numbers for, management fee per major injury was $17,100. Now that says something to us, Madam Speaker, about the blowout in costs, because it shows the staggering of rate and growth that the fees have paid to private insurers to manage workers' compensation claims. Over the same period, injury rates have fallen and benefits paid to injured workers have barely kept up with inflation. They are the facts, Madam Speaker, from WorkCover reports. Yet no one has taken on the private insurance industry, and we know that in the report, in the workers' Madam Speaker, I ask for an extension of time, please.
The question is that the member's time be extended. All of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The member's time is extended.
I notice in page 243 there's a note that says, quote, the management of agents, including their remuneration, should be examined. That was a committee comment, and I understand the committee will be looking to pursue those issues. And in fact, indeed they should, Madam Speaker, because while the WorkCover scheme is a publicly owned statutory fund, it pays private insurers to manage every claim. Now, payments made to private insurers to manage claims and to encourage those injured to return to work. Now, this is a very important point, because the $3.9 billion paid to these private insurers since 1996 has not led to any significant increase in injured workers returning to work. Has not led to any significant increase. There's been almost no change in the rate at which injured workers have returned to work since 2003. And that's in the WorkCover Annual Report 2010-11, page 41, and the Annual Report 789, page 24, with 2003 being the first comparable year figures were available as reported in the financial year 2008 report. So there has not been an increase in injured workers returning to work. There's been $3.9 billion paid to these private insurers. There's been massive increases in these fees, and management fees paid to private insurers have grown from just 10% of the cost of benefits paid in financial year 97 to more than 24% of the benefits paid to injured workers in financial year 2010. I encourage the staff that are here and the Minister's staff to address that matter, because we've heard that the cost paid for workers' compensation is commensurate with industry standards, and these are the questions which we'd like to have answered, and they would be questions that would have been answered at a crossbench briefing if the government had given the opportunity for a briefing. So it's unfortunate I have to take the House's time now to be asking these questions. So WorkCover really does need to be addressed, and to no date, no government has had the courage to tackle the problem in the workers' compensation scheme, which is this growth, in my view, in the bureaucracy and what looks like to be the padding of fees. And the member for Macquarie Fields raised that in the AMA submission. Constant requesting reports and details that's already been answered. Padding by the insurance companies in order to generate fees to sustain themselves and not sustain the workers, which has led to an increase of the cost of benefits paid in terms of the private insurers component from 10% to 24%. So, in my view, the fact that a quarter of the amounts paid in benefits for injured workers is being siphoned off to private insurers to manage the claims seems to be an unreasonable amount of money. Almost 25% to manage the claims. I just find that a staggering amount of money, considering in financial year 1997 it was 10%. So I'd ask the Treasurer if you could please address those questions. So before we take on injured workers, I would have hoped that the government would have addressed these matters. Now, I understand that the member for Toongabbie raised some of the actuarial matters, and I do understand the committee hadn't had the opportunity to examine some of those actuarial matters and the actuarial tables in detail. But there's one thing that should concern all members, which is retrospectivity. There's one thing that does frustrate me, which is the retrospectivity factor in this bill. When this bill passes, from that moment, people's rights will be taken away, and I'm concerned about this retrospectivity element. And I'd like to ask the Treasurer to address that. I know that it wasn't recommended by the Joint Select Committee, and the big challenge, and I know that it's late and I won't take much more of the House's time, is that the challenge in this, in my mind, is the skyrocketing fees paid to private insurers to manage the claims. That is an issue this government needs to tackle. We know that the committee said it was an issue they need to address. The government's been in power now for like 16 months or so. You would have thought this would have been something they could take on. Now, I know this bill will pass and the government will say they'll address this issue, and I encourage the Treasurer, get stuck into these private insurers that are taking 25%. Have a go at that, because I would have a go. If you put me in that chair, I would have a go at them. And that's very important, I think, Treasurer, that, Madam Speaker.
Don't be tempted to respond, Member for Balmain.
Madam Speaker, I think that is very important because at the short amount of time I've had to review the details, it's something that became apparent to me. So can I conclude, Madam Speaker, by saying that this is a major reduction in the rights of workers at the moment, workers that can be covered travelling to and from work, and all the other elements that I mentioned. It's clear that the government, it's clear that steps do need to be taken in any matter where there seems to be financial risk in the future. But the question that we need to ask is this the easy solution? Are the factors which are currently being considered by the committee, which the committee was not able to consider, really the meat and potatoes of this issue? And the issues that I've raised, Madam Speaker, in terms of these payments, I think do need to be vigorously pursued by the government. We need to make sure that if we look back, for example, 96, 97 years, for 4 or 5 years after that, when management fees per major injury were $2,000 or $3,000 and now they're 17, seems to be quite excessive. And I urge the Treasurer to act on this. As I have said previously, I will not be supporting this legislation. I don't think this is the right place to be taking this, either from a process perspective or from the content of the bill. Thank you.
You spoke. Do you want to speak? Okay, yeah. Won't be long. Yes, the question is that these bills be read a second time. Call the member for